Welcome back to Built the Ship, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with founders and product leaders shipping real AI products into the world. I'm joined today by Zach, founder and CEO of Leapcure, a company on a mission to make clinical trials more equitable and effective by elevating patient voices and supercharging engagement through technology. Zach, it's great to have you.
Thanks, Tyler. Excited to be with you.
Awesome. Well, I want to start at the beginning. What were you doing before Leapcure? You mentioned to me before this that you're around year 10 in the business. So what led you to the idea of Leapcure? What were you doing before, and why'd you make the jump to start a company?
Yeah. So just before Leapcure, I worked at a company that was also in the clinical research space. I think what gave me the kind of conviction to get after Leapcure partly was what I saw was not working in clinical trials, which I had exposure prior to how startups were being built in Silicon Valley, and my exposure to my first experience in research. There was kind of a disconnect between who the evangelist users are of research, which are patients, patient advocacy, and the people running research. You can think of them almost like your developers, the people who are doing the hard science to develop a treatment. You weren't kind of bridging the feedback between the two. And when we were running research that it would get done 10 times better. I helped the company prior increase their margin from around 10-12% to 80%, just kind of figuring out when can you connect really good feedback with really good research, and how do we stay away from the situations where they're not resourcing it enough because they can't make that bridge. But for me, I started Leapcure kind of with that inkling of trying to do as much as I can to kind of connect advocacy. What it's become since is so much more, which has been awesome, but a lot that I didn't expect in terms of how we connect with people, the impact of research, and what really feels good about the work, because it always had even prior, it felt good kind of to help improve the health system, but when you get to the ground and you're able to kind of help people transform perspective, whether that's patients that had a difficult outlook and helping them get informed, educated, and into studies that offer them care that they wouldn't otherwise have had, or even the people running research and helping them kind of reach out to the patients and really be more open and give work with physicians that have a really busy day to day, and kind of help them carve the spaces to provide a level of support that they typically wouldn't be able to. So that's what's kind of kept me in it going into year 10.
Amazing. And you mentioned that you sort of had an exploration in your job before Leapcure that kind of got you this idea. Why did you make the jump to go do this on your own versus was it just too much bureaucracy at that company, or you just felt like if you focus specifically on this approach, there'd be a lot more leverage?
Yeah, that company I was at was trying to go raise their next round, and they had a shift, and I found myself, not going with them when they made the shift. And so I had a choice of what I wanted to do next, and I had kind of an itch to scratch. And it started with hey, this work felt really good. How do I just focus on what I really liked about it? And I had a number of other people from previous experiences that were kind of with me, that helped co-found the business. But it was really just how do we kind of focus on this thing that seems to be working? I don't want to kind of go into another industry. There was something really working there. And so there was kind of an itch to scratch, was my starting point. Yeah, what the business is, how it works. At first we thought we were going to be this product business that, it's oh, if we could just solve one capability, we can, have something that explodes. And what we learned over time was a lot of the nuance of what makes this, challenge of bringing patients into clinical trials hard. So we were a little naive at first too, to be honest, because we thought oh, they just solve one thing and we unlock all this value. There's a lot of little things that you have to care about, but we started caring to some degree, and then learning more about the business, I continued to really feel fulfilled by kind of moving in the direction of supporting clinical trials.
I'm super curious about that, like, original idea and then figuring out, there's more to it than that, all those things. Like, we're going through that ourselves, coming up on a year of Voker. Um, how, what was that like? Was it like a slow learning? How long did it take? Years? Or was it like overnight? You're like, wait, something became super clear, and all of a sudden you're like, we need to focus this way. And was that a pivot, or, what did that really?
The problems were apparent right away, and I'm sure you're seeing that. How things get solved, they're still kind of playing out today. I would say 10 years later, but yeah, at first we thought like, oh, if we just build this product and message these people about it, they'll be interested in kind of working with us. Then we realized like, no, actually they've got a lot of competing priorities. This is how we fit in. And even if we make it super cheap, like their time is valuable. And so we're like, okay, how do we kind of like find our groove? So there's some challenges like that, which, kind of early product market fit style challenges. But over time, like if we wouldn't enroll patients as quickly as we thought we would, like our model was working with broad advocacy. There would be times where we'd find like 500 advocacy patients raising their hands, giving us information, saying, I want to join a clinical trial. And then like 4 or 5 would actually make it through, versus in my previous business, we had a ratio of like 2 or 3 to 1 that would, get into, it was a different style of research. And why, we knew it was broken right away. How we solve it best holistically has evolved over 10 years. Like, so we continue to kind of get better at it, but the reason why it felt rewarding, one, we did see our first deals, we did see our first enrollments happen, and we had enough of a carrot there that like, oh, something really good is starting to happen, and I think that helped us kind of frame the challenge of, well, how do we get better at it? Because something's going well, how do we build on what, we could have focused on the 400 whatever patients that weren't getting through and said, oh, that 400 is such a big challenge, we don't want to do this. Or we could focus on like, how do we grow the 5 to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, that's been our journey, but it depends. Like, I think you need to have what I call like problem founder fit. Like, there's going to be some problems where, and I experienced this prior to Leapcure. I tried like a fantasy sports startup, and when I had those failures, it was like I don't care about persevering. Like, what I learned was I like fantasy sports, but the market is probably more degenerate gamblers. I don't care about kind of getting them more engaged, and so sometimes it's not your problem to solve, and you have to learn that through experience too.
That's super insightful. Well, I wanted to understand a little bit more. I kind of get at a high level like what Leapcure does, but maybe can you walk me through like a specific user journey or a customer? Like, why do they come to Leapcure? What does your product and service do for them?
Yeah,
maybe a little more tangible.
So Leapcure would never get into Y Combinator because we have too many people that are like, we have too many markets to serve. There are too many kind of stakeholders. There's the people running research, biotech, pharma companies. They have, a time frame that they're trying to enroll patients so that they get an approval that extends their patent life cycle. And so they'll pay us, those are our clients, that say, hey, we want to enroll 100 patients by the end of the year. If we miss that, it hurts the value of our asset. So they'll contract with us. The process of finding patients and enrolling them, we have to look through what the study protocols are, figure out where all the research sites are in whatever country. We work in like 50 different countries to do this. and we'll reach out to patients via nonprofit advocacy groups that they're a part of through the social newsletters, as well as run digital ads. And then there's kind of like a digital vetting process, a human-to-human vetting process, like a medical practitioner vetting process. And then we send the patients that get through that entire funnel to the research sites, where they'll be followed up with by usually the staff of a physician that's running the clinical trial that'll kind of take it from there. There's a lot of kind of regulatory things that we have to navigate, ways that you have to manage patient data, but at a high level, that's the patient journey. But to attract advocacy groups in, there's a relationship life cycle to manage the relationship with those research sites who have day jobs. There's kind of ways that we have to work with them and what capacity they have. We can't send them too many patients. We can't send them too little patients. And we also don't control with marketing enough with our budgets of like how many patients can be interested when and where. And so there's a bunch of kind of moving parts. But yeah, we've gotten pretty good at it. We've enrolled, I think the average that we calculated was 62% of the studies that we've worked on for the, scope that we've been given. And, for most in our space, you're lucky to get 5 to 10%. We've been doing something that's pretty special and been the difference in many cases with a treatment moving forward or getting killed because of its feasibility.
Amazing. No, that's a really helpful example, and the problem seems super clear to me from the client or customer side, from how you explained it. Like, if this is going to impact the value of their asset, and you guys have these great relationships and process to bring them, vetted candidates, that's the value is really clear there. And then also on the patient side, like, they're probably getting access and exposure to these things that would have been harder for them to find, right?
Yeah. And that's been kind of our growth as a business on the patient side too, which is at first we thought it was almost like oh, you're this patient, go talk to that person. What we learned a lot about is when patients are reaching out to us, like, we're an unknown entity. People are very vulnerable and like giving us a bunch of personal health information for a reason. And it's often because like they're in these very difficult moments where standard care doesn't give them as good of a lifestyle as what they're looking for. And so we have those, I call them vetting processes, but what we're often learning is best is helping patients advocate for themselves, we're not just validating that they're fit to move on, but we're helping them understand their options, educating them on other clinical trials or what treatments are available, helping them make a decision about joining a clinical trial from an abundance mindset perspective, and then handing them off. So we're really finding people that should be a fit for research. What that's done is I talked about the case where there's 500 patients and only 5 of them would enroll. Those 490 other patients, we're leaving them better off, and we're getting like testimonials as often from those folks about how like this was an inflection point for how I communicated with my family or my physician about my treatment options. We're really helping uplift people to take on really difficult diseases and conditions. That's become something I didn't anticipate when I started the company, and it probably took us like 4 or 5 years to get a grasp on that. It started with, hey, why aren't they enrolling? Validate, get more data. Hey, if we send if we have like a social worker from Berkeley do that process, we can get better data. And then what we realized was like, oh, there's something more important going on that we can do here. And so that's and kind of going to AI. Now we're thinking of like, okay, how does AI kind of like help us maximize this equation? And how do we prepare our staff for conversations? How do we take the certain things and make it more accessible to patients in their journey? And so we're starting to tinker with that, which is cool.
That's a great segue. I'm curious, it sounds like that process that you have is like, there's a lot of stages for good reason. But you mentioned the digital screening, like the the human to human. I think then also like a physician, and then also there's like the screening by the actual research team running the trial.
Yeah.
Like, how are you thinking about AI for your business? That sounds kind of like, you know, not that 100% of that could be or should be replaced,
Yeah.
but like that there could be places for AI to assist there. Have you guys started exploring that, or yeah, what's your thinking?
Yeah. Like AI is an interesting thing because we're kind of always in search of like, how can we make this better? And there's almost like infinite loops of like process improvement with AI. So I can speak to kind of where we are today, and like, who knows if I'm full of crap or if things will completely change in 3 months. But for now, you know, to me, what you're bringing up, I think, is a good point. Where there's going to be certain people that don't want to have so many stages. That you're going to have different profiles of people, different levels of patients. You know, who we are is a company that will try to build trust and partner. And so we are a little bit more like have extra checkpoints. We kind of embrace like, you know, sometimes slow is fast, making sure that we really understand we're putting someone in the right position to move to the next step is important. If you're a cancer patient, you have to make a decision by tomorrow. That can be pretty frustrating. So I think AI is helping us kind of do a better job of profiling so that the people that are a fit for kind of a high trust partnership style of recruitment get that experience. But the people who we usually wouldn't have capacity for as much, that don't kind of fit into our traditional partnership trust funnel, that we're able to kind of like help them navigate their own course. And you know, I think that's really cool. Another thing is like I've had 10 years of a front row seat. I'm not technical, but a front row seat to like what it's taking to build Leapcure. And I can jump on Replit and build what took like 4 or 5 years from engineers. I can do something. It's not ready for production, but I can get most of it built in like 3 weeks. And if I was smarter at using Replit, maybe even like a few days. And so there's also kind of this opportunity where like I was never like the key person to like driving engineering output. And the equation has changed. Like my involvement in product can be so much more impactful. And there's a way to kind of bridge when someone's not technical. And so navigating like a lot of like best practices of how you scale a business, how you want your CEO to be in this visionary seat, you know, there's a little bit of like that founder mode equation, you know, shifts. And so, and that helps us kind of think more about what can we do for patients? What are those things that have been on the back burner for years? Things related to like complications with med records, for example, like that we can start to take on. So that's where we are today, but you know, we'll see. Maybe we move past these things in a few months. Maybe I'm in the same place. Who knows?
That's awesome. I'm curious, like, has this, you know, LLM wave transformed? Like, have you hired internally, like, hey, we're going to hire some, you know, AI engineers? Have you kind of like given any sort of top-down mandate of like you've seen companies like Shopify say everyone needs to use AI, you know, those kind of things? What's kind of your approach as a CEO?
Yeah, and there's
How
another
do you-
thing. Yeah, it's another thing that'll shift. You know, I think about a year and a half ago, I like gave everyone ChatGPT Premium. Right now, I'm setting up kind of these AWS Bedrock environments so that people can, you know, play around with data in a way where, you know, training data is not getting out. We are looking at a different engineering structure right now. Like we've been fully remote for, you know, since the pandemic, and someone in person with me that can like kind of jump into my Replit playground and like exchange context. That suddenly becomes a really big opportunity that wasn't going to be prioritized before. So we're kind of just like I'm reading and reacting. I'm getting information. You know, months ago I might have felt like, oh, like the trust building process, AI won't be good for that. Articles are coming out about how like AI can empathize better than therapists in some cases, and so is that going to be reliable? You know, what does that mean for research? There's some things that are shifting as well. So, but yeah, I think the in terms of hiring, we've started like looking at whether instead of having your traditional project managers, you have a prompt engineer, and the way that you kind of think about engineering, there's less segmentation of engineering from the business. I think that engineering needs to kind of grasp business context in a different way for companies at our size, at least. If your challenge is really technical in many ways, maybe that's different. But for us, I think that being closer to business context from an engineering perspective, AI can kind of bridge the gap a bit better. So that's my thought.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Does Leapcure have like an in-house data or ML team, or is it mostly like products software engineers, or what's kind of your
Yeah. Today, we have like an engineering team of like 4 or 5, and no one focused on ML or even really AI. It's kind of like a full stack engineer that's kind of curious about how to integrate things in. And yeah, I'm not sure how things will shift, if I'm being honest, because I think we're starting to kind of make new hires and kind of take this new direction, and we're going to kind of work with what we have and kind of build from there, most likely. We also we haven't raised VC money. We don't have pressure to kind of take a certain path to hit certain milestones. We've been cash flow positive since going through accelerators.
Amazing.
And so for better or for worse, I'm the governance plan of our business. But we get to kind of treat this more like a sandbox type of challenge than bet the business, on solving a technical thing.
Totally. No, that's my first job was actually at a startup that was bootstrapped, and we had to be cash flow positive to pay our employees, and it's really now being in the VC world, it's been kind of interesting to compare the two approaches, and I came from that like kind of bootstrap and mentality, and so really try to bring that to kind of how we run this business. But it is, to your point, hard to juggle with um, the VC expectations and things like that. But it's just interesting to me how a lot of people's business model is like, well, we're going to do this to get to our Series A, and then we're going to do this to get to our Series B. And I'm like, that's not exactly a business model. That's more of a fundraising model. I don't know. But anyways.
It's cool that you're able to get a front row seat to the VC model after having that. I'd be curious because we stopped trying to raise money, and so how to marry those two things, because there's some things that feel like they're innately important to a business, generating cash flow, how you're kind of creating some sort of equilibrium in the sustainability of your business in some ways. But then there's also these like really big opportunities that can kind of up level how you work. And so,
Totally.
that's got to be fascinating.
It kind of reminds me of like, I remember in college, like, a lot of people get their undergrad degree and then they don't know what to do. So they're like, I'm just going to go get a master's or a PhD just because I'm supposed to do it. And that feels to me sometimes like people are like, well, we're going to go raise around, I talk to a lot of early founders in the LA area. We're based in Los Angeles. Nice. And I go to like these meetups, and people will like ask me like, hey, how do I go raise money and stuff? And I'm like, well, have you talked to any potential customers? Like, do you know what you want for your business? And so I think, kind of like to your point, it makes sense when you have an opportunity that you really need that like that fuel to help grow. But in my opinion, it shouldn't be something that like is just default. This is how you do it. So big props to you for building a cash flow positive business. That is not easy, and it takes a lot of discipline, and it's especially challenging when you probably have competitors or other folks in the space that are VC backed and just like throw money at things.
I think this being year 10, it helps me feel a little bit more assured in our path. But definitely early on, where it's like, oh, these people raised 14 million, and we're just doing this, and like you'd almost like look at as a juxtaposition of your performance. Like they were able to raise this round, we didn't.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, yeah, they raised at a really bad time, and like they raised based on assumptions that they couldn't continue to manage, um, and so like it's not the right path for everyone, but it's not what you hear up front. Up front, you'll usually get kind of benchmarked, um, which it's well intended people, but like not a. We started the company when we were based in LA, and
Oh, nice.
yeah, it's you don't get so many diversity of thought, particularly from people who've kind of like had to navigate, like go cash flow positive versus VC backed. So, but it's good that you have the that first experience, because there's a way to kind of build a foundation in your business. Building something that's cash flow positive, building a culture around that is a lot easier. There's a lot of advantages. And so if you kind of know how to work with both, that can be really powerful. So
Totally. Yeah. I wanted to ask about, you mentioned how you see a lot of opportunities. You're using, AI yourself, like with Replit and other things. You see places you want to, add it to your workflow to, for certain types of patients who might want a quicker process. How are you actually going out and doing that? You mentioned that your full stack engineers are kind of interested in exploring. This is what we see with a lot of the businesses we talk to, is like, you don't need an ML or AI or data engineering team anymore, because you used to need that to do the supervised model training, which is
yeah.
the background I came from. And now you already have these models that are pre-trained. Maybe you do a little bit of fine tuning and prompting, but it kind of really democratizes AI for everyone. I guess, how are you guys going about like building these prototypes and stuff? Is you doing it in Replit, but are you also having the engineers, like they're doing side projects where they're like, I'm going to integrate with OpenAI and try something out?
Yeah. Today I'm the side project, and there's like the engineers have been maintaining. So we sell to enterprise clients. So for our style of business, like there's noise when little things break. And a lot of what drives value is how we maintain enterprise relationships and deliver things. We're fortunate we work in a space where for us to kind of get the domain down and deliver the right technology at the right time, we've gotten pretty good, and we stand out in our space compared to others. There's so much I want to do that we're not doing right now with kind of the training models. Like we've kind of set up the infrastructure in some ways to go do it, but I think we can move a lot faster. We can enroll our first patient a month sooner. It's what can be done is very promising. What we're doing right now isn't there yet, if I'm being honest. We're still pretty fast compared to what you'd look at in the space, but if we were able to compile, if we were to kind of take a more machine learning driven approach, not just in how we analyze the funnel, but also how we think about what's going on when we're vetting, and if we're kind of having our support team like have a dynamic list of things that they're kind of inquiring about with patients. There's a lot of value on the table that I feel and this is kind of the CEO's dilemma of a company that's 10 years in. There's a lot of things going well, keep that going, and then these kind of other kind of visions I have where it's like I want to drive, got to find the right kind of balance to keep things on the tracks. So that's where we are. But we're really excited for kind of the future of clinical research that I think we're able to move closer and closer with AI and machine learning to bridge the gap between what's technically kind of possible with science and the human behavior side of like what actually can get enabled. And so we look forward to kind of trying to be more on the cutting edge, but there's some stuff on the table that we haven't done yet, if I'm being honest.
Totally. Yeah. But I think that sounds like a really balanced approach. There's some people who are like, tomorrow we're going to have an AI that replaces everything we do. And it's like, not every human wants to interact with a chatbot. There's other paradigms of how to build it. And I think like what you're saying about even just this classification, that's not saying that we don't still need like the current folks that are part of that process, it's just like, hey, we can improve that process, and maybe eventually there's even more things you can automate.
Yeah.
But that's where we've seen people be successful, is a super iterative approach to like using LLMs and AI, because the people who sit in a room and they're like, let's figure out our tenure strategy and all this governance stuff and everything, like then next week, like the models change and you have to go rethink it all and you haven't actually built anything. And so yeah, it sounds like that more like iterative approach, even if the long-term vision is exciting and lofty, like you still need to start getting there by just trying things.
Yeah. And we have the kind of this challenge of like focus diversion too. And so like how much focus should we divert from like the big swing, like how much we put into a big swing versus incrementally building what's there. And we try to kind of as a leadership bring that together, but really we're figuring it out as we go, and just like whatever feels right, that's usually where it goes.
Totally. Well, yeah, this has been super interesting. Really have enjoyed the conversation. I'm curious, what's like next for Leapcure?
Yeah. Again, there's another thing where like in 3 months, I wonder what the answer will be. But I do think like this cross section of AI into our business, there's all of those little things that like can now become feasible that we're going to go after. So thinking holistically about advocating for patients, thinking about how we partner with the research sites, and all the capabilities and services that we can provide, because we have a lot of insights about what people want from a treatment perspective. And so, yeah, I'm excited for us to kind of take on, better serving the voice of patients. Yeah, we have like, millions of voices to kind of empower, and in a growing business, we've kind of doubled already this year compared to last year. And
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And so, so we're also figuring out what scaling looks like as we go.
Amazing.
So yeah,
Tough challenges, but exciting things to figure out.
yeah, yeah. You kind of hit new breaking points and then figure it out. But yeah, it's what we signed up for. This is what we wanted, for better or worse. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I want to throw your website up on the screen for a sec, and just wanted to ask, like, where's the best place to follow you? I know, give a shout out to your podcast, the Leap Together podcast. Anywhere else that's good to follow?
Yeah, keep up on our podcast and our blog. Yeah, I think it's blog.leapcure.com, and then look out for the Leap Together podcast. We're 2 episodes in. And I think right now, every other week we'll be launching new ones. But also, if you're a patient or any patients that could use the support, you can use leapcure.com to kind of find research opportunities or share your stories. I'd encourage you to do that as well.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, really enjoyed the convo, Zach. Thanks for coming on. Love to talk again soon.
Yeah, excited for you and in year one. Really appreciate the opportunity to kind of connect here, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Have a good one. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, you too. Both of us.